They wear silver and have a star on their helmet. I don't know that it's reciprocated, though, and I don't know that it's feeling like a rivalry week even on Saturday, the day before. Our 97.3 ESPN Eagles insider John McMullen joins us. John, is it starting to feel like Dallas week yet?
A little bit yesterday. I think you saw Doug's comments finally get down to Dallas, or at least they acknowledged them with DeMarcus Lawrence. So maybe that picked things up a little bit. I think in general, though, I talked about it earlier in the week. I agree with you. I don't see the same level of acrimony you used to see. But I don't think that's just an Eagles-Cowboys thing. I think that's all across the NFL, maybe with the exception of Pittsburgh and Baltimore, who seem to have kept an old-school rivalry. But even that has changed with guys like Terrell Suggs leaving Baltimore, and old school guys, the more they leave, the lesser it gets. And guys trade jerseys, and it's different. And I think it's different in all sports. And, yeah, I think it's more of a fan base thing now. The fans don't like each other, but the players, hey, they just go out and play and want to see their friends and shake hands after.
Well, at least we know this, John. We didn't have to hear Andy Reid like in the old days. You remember how many times he had to recycle the I was in the Wawa and the old lady told me beat Dallas story? I mean, didn't we hear that every year leading into the Dallas game?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's still plenty of fans. And even at that, I think it has to do with relevancy at the time. I mean, right now, this is a two-horse race. So it is Eagles-Cowboys. At times in the past, the Giants games have had more relevancy. I think it's been a while for the Redskins. And the Redskins are certainly the Cowboys' most natural rival historically. But it's tough to get up for a rivalry that's one-sided. Always that joke, fire doesn't have a rivalry with kindling. So if you're beating somebody up, it's tough to have a lot of acrimony for that particular team. So right now the NFC is Eagles Cowboys, and whoever handles their business is probably going to win the division in the two games. So this is a big game.
I did hear you yesterday on the Sports Bash with the guys talking about the fact that, when the injury reports came out, the final injury reports came out, a lot of people were surprised at how many people are going to try to go for Dallas, and maybe that's a reflection of how badly they want to win the game. But you had a turn of phrase. I thought it was like, well, they're just going to play injured players where the Eagles are deciding to just sit them out. I forget how you phrased it, so give me your turn of phrase that you used and your perspective and take on the fact that Dallas is trying to get everybody out there.
Well, I don't recall exactly what I said, but yeah, I mean, the difference is that they've lost 3 consecutive games, and this is a home game. So we just talked about the fact that the NFC East is coming down to essentially 2 games, and you always want to take care of business at home. If you lose that home game, then your margin for error gets even smaller because then you have to go on the road and beat Philadelphia at Lincoln Financial Field if you want to get to the NFC East Championship, most likely. So the Cowboys are playing unhealthy guys, and the Eagles have decided to go in a different direction with certainly Deshaun Jackson, but Nigel Bradham, Jason Peters, they're not close enough to play, so it's a little bit different. But you can sense the desperation from the Cowboys because I talked to a bunch of writers down there earlier in the week, and they all told me the same thing. Cooper's not playing. Smith's probably not playing. Collins isn't playing. Then we get to Friday, and everybody's going to try to play. Mm-hmm. So I think that tells you something. And I don't think it's that those guys got healthy. It's that they feel they have to do something. And by the way, there's no guarantee, Pete, they're going to play. They're all questionable.
Oh, okay.
And they're all going to give it a go, and they're going to try to play. But there's no guarantee they're going to play. And I would especially look at Amari Cooper just because of the nature of that position And the same reason Deshaun Jackson isn't out there. When you have those thoroughbreds, and you're talking about leg injuries, in the case of Deshaun, abdomen, core muscle injuries, and they don't feel 100%, that's going to affect them. So even if he's out there, it might be more as a decoy than anything else.
John, what are we hearing about Deshaun Jackson? Because this was the game they were projecting that he would be back for.
Well, originally he was going to miss 2 games.
Oh, that's true.
So, and then when the Vikings game started, then it was all of a sudden, well, he's probably not going to play in Minneapolis, but he should be back for Dallas. And now it's, let's hope he's back for Buffalo. It's a situation, and it's been described to me as a grade 2 abdomen strain, which is a slight tear. It's interesting. The Eagles don't want the term sports hernia out there. And this morning I've been texting back and forth with a doctor, and I said, what the heck is the difference? Because you go on WebMD or any of these sites, and they say sports hernia is a small tear in any of the soft tissue, groin, abdomen, and he's got a tear in the abdomen. So what the heck is the difference? So a lot of it is just semantics, but the recommendation was surgery, and Deshaun wanted to go in a different direction. He wanted to rehab, and he wanted to try to get back on the field as quickly as possible. If he had the surgery originally, maybe 4 to 6 weeks, we're already there. So this is going to be an issue, and Doug admitted he's not going to be 100% even when he does come back. Now, he did couch that by saying nobody's 100%, but this is not going well. I'll just say that.
Yeah, for sure. And this is obviously not what Eagles fans were hoping for when Deshaun Jackson came back, although he's not getting any younger. And, you know, it would be a weird coda to his Eagles time or Eagles career if this season gets chalked up to one great comeback win against the Redskins thanks to Deshaun, and that was it. I mean, could you see that? Could you actually see him missing the rest of the way, or do you anticipate that at some point Deshaun's going to go, I got to get out there no matter what and at least try?
No, I expect him to get out there. And then from that point, is there going to be a aggravation or setback, and then things could go in a really negative direction. Everyone says he's close. He's out there now on the field this week, which was the first time he's worked on a side field when we were there, the media. So he is getting closer, and he is going to try to play at some point. His camp, you know, he says he wants to get as close to 100% as possible. It's one of those things where if you're a player, and Doug kind of talked about it with Sidney Jones, different injury, different type player. But certain guys need to feel completely healthy to get out there, and other guys understand they're not going to feel that way and fight through it. In the case of Deshaun, it's like a sports car, and you got to have that thing idling perfectly, and if it's not, it doesn't want to go anywhere, and I think that's where we are.
John, one of the great stories you wrote on our website this week on 97.3 ESPN.com deals with J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, or as you've dubbed him in the article, J-Jaw. Thank you for simpling that to a nice radio term. So without Jackson, Eagles need Arcega-Whiteside on the field, and the key sentence is right in the third graph. The problem seems to be cross-training or lack thereof.
Yeah, I mean, the Eagles, and this is a head-scratcher, and, you know, there's the outside receivers are defined as X and Z, and basically their explanation is that Mac Hollins is Deshaun's backup. at the Z position, and Alshon is backed up by JJ. And if Alshon was injured, JJ would be playing. And because Deshaun is not playing, it's more Mac Hollins. And at some points, you have to say, hey, the kid's from Stanford. He can learn more than one position. Mac's not performing. He's a second-round pick. He's got the much higher ceiling as a player. You got to throw him in the deep end of the pool and get some production. Doesn't seem like the Eagles are at that spot, and I don't understand it.
It is a head-scratcher. Yeah, go ahead.
Now, obviously they play a lot more 12 personnel without Deshaun, and Dallas Goedert's healthy. So that's the main crux of it, Dallas getting on the field more, which is fine. But when you do have three receivers on the field, I don't want Mac Hollins on the field. You've seen enough of that. I think everyone can agree with that. Eagles do not agree with that.
And not for nothing, but you're also right that to date, 10 different receivers taken after Jay Jaw, who was selected number 57 in the April draft, have produced more. And so when you see names like Terry McLaurin blow up on fantasy football because he's one of Washington's best offensive threats, you have to sit there as Eagles fan or as fantasy football player and go, boy, this guy, Jay Jaw, he doesn't do anything. He's terrible. Who's doing the talent evaluating in that room?
Well, there's two different things. Obviously, Howie and the personnel department are responsible for giving the players to the coaching staff, and then when the season starts, it's the coaching staff. So this is on the coaches. It's not on Howie Roseman. You could argue a guy like Terry McLaurin would be a better fit for what the Eagles need, and that's probably true because he's a speed guy, but you're not assuming that Deshaun's going to get hurt, or you can't assume he's going to get hurt. So that's a little bit of hindsight, and everybody can do that, and that's a little bit unfair. And then you also have to add the context that sort of like a 20-point scorer on a bad NBA team. I mean, somebody's got to catch the football on bad teams. So there's no guarantee somebody like McLaurin's going to have similar production on a good team where there's better players in front of them. So you throw that all into the mix. But the main point is if you draft a guy in the premium rounds, you draft him for a reason. And you're seeing that with Andre Dillard this week. Okay, you have Jason Peters, but Jason's hurt, and you're going to throw Andre Dillard in there. To be honest, Halapoulivaati Vaitai is more ready to play left tackle right now than Andre Dillard. But the Eagles are throwing him into the deep end of the pool. Why? Because he's got a higher ceiling. And at some point, you got to ramp it up, and he's got to start learning. And the best way to learn is to be on the field. Well, why doesn't that hold true for J.J. Arcega-Whiteside? It doesn't make sense. And I think the coaching staff is not understanding what's plainly in front of their face.
So, John, we made it this long in the interview without talking about Mark Felt. To give the history lesson to all our listeners out there, Mark Felt was the actual person revealed to be deep throat in the Watergate scandal. He rose to be the associate director of the FBI, the number 2 position at the FBI. And why did that make it in one of John's articles on 97.3 ESPN? Well, because all week there's been this Josina Anderson stuff swirling, and you very comically put a spin on it by saying Deep Throat wasn't revealed on Friday, but the suspects that everybody were going to both denied that they were the Mark Felt.
Yeah, Alshon Jeffrey is the one everyone defaults to because he's had a relationship with Josina in the past, and he's given her on the record quotes, and they're pretty close at least from a reporter player standpoint. So everyone kind of defaults to that. I did not, simply because I read the comments and they weren't coming from a receiver, because there's not a receiver in the history of the world that is ever advocating checking the football down.
Right.
and certainly not Alshon Jeffrey. He wants the ball. Just from that common sense standpoint, it's not a receiver. People thought Nelson Aguilar as well. He adamantly denied it, and that is just not the way Nelson does business. So I thought from the start it was a defensive player, and just from the inartful, as I put comments about the offense, didn't seem to understand what was going on. And like I said, if you want to read the tea leaves, and I gave them out yesterday, there was a defensive player in the locker room who was no longer in the locker room, who also has a long-term relationship with Josina Anderson.
And a history of just to say what's ever on his mind. In fact, it might have got him the ticket out of town.
And he's a very blunt guy, and he tells what he perceives to be the truth. And, for instance, the Kirk Cousins comments, that was the truth. That's the way people play the Vikings. They don't want Dalvin Cook to beat them. They don't want the football in the hands of Stephon Diggs or Adam Thielen. They want Kirk Cousins to make mistakes. He told the truth. In that case, he's 100% correct. But Zach is a very blunt guy. And he will say what's on his mind. I don't know it was him, but again, if you want to look at long-term relationships and something that makes sense, that makes more sense. Either way, the comments didn't make sense, and that's why Doug Peterson kind of laughed them off yesterday.